that we've. Thank you for letting me know that. Yeah, so hope everyone's had a great day. It's great to see that we've collected a good group of people here tonight. So yeah, I'd like to just get started, and if people keep want to keep popping in, that they can keep popping in. So my name is Darius Cox. I'm a fourth year student at King's. I'm studying political science and sociology. I'm also a current board member of the Gender Equality Coalition of Ontario, and I just live a pretty basic life outside of London. So I'm not doing anything too substantial, just finishing up school and yeah. But tonight I will be the moderator for the panel event. So it'll be my first rodeo being a moderator of a panel. So go easy on me. I'm not a professional, but I'm really thankful for the opportunity. So we're all here tonight to learn and for empowerment. We're striving for equal opportunities and safer communities for all, no matter who we are. The Gender Equality Coalition of Ontario endlessly advocates for this and advocates for equitable communities, working with local community partners and even internationally at the United Nations to boost awareness for projects that are life-changing for many. So the speaker series, why we're here tonight, is actually one of those gears in the machine that continues to power us towards these goals. We're creating a safe space for meaningful conversations to happen, and efficient conversations at that, where some of the great minds are able to come together, create the foundations, create the bridges to opportunities that create the type of advocacy that we're pushing to see in our communities. So we're also able to hear the different people around us in our community that we may not know beforehand, or that we have been waiting to see speak, and we get to hear about their journeys and their work through advocacy. And these conversations are a lot more than just people want to see these conversations happen, but they also want to learn from the folks that have that experience, and hopefully that sparks more innovation and allows people to come together and build networks amongst the community partners. And that also helps tremendously in paving the way to equality and solidarity with everyone. So tonight we have the privilege of having Yusra Ahmed, Ray Jardine, and Kezia Odro here with us to guide us through tonight's topic, which is engaging youth in contemporary gender equality discourse. Essentially, why we need youth engaged in conversations regarding gender discourse and how we can make that happen as a community. But yeah, I mean, that's really enough of me and my little spiel. We're really here to see, the panelists and hear about the work that they do and what they want to see in our community. So why don't we move on to them, and why don't you tell us a bit about yourselves, your experience and what brought you into your advocacy work. So why don't we start off with Yusra?
Thank you for having me. My name is Yusra Ahmed, and I bring a diverse background in global health, specifically focusing on human biology with minors in physiology and African studies from the University of Toronto. As a Black and Muslim woman from Somalia, my journey has been shaped by a profound commitment to advancing gender equality. My advocacy work began during my time as a board member at the Ontario Public Interest Research Group, or OPER Toronto, where I actively contribute to discussions guiding the organization's missions and goals. As a CSW 68 delegate and a youth policymaker, I collaborate with the Ontario Council for International Cooperation, or OCIC, along with my fellow YPH members, formulating recommendation reports for UN Women, contributing to panels, and leveraging my knowledge in gender equality and poverty. I came to be a YPH member through a friend of mine. She had recommended I apply to this program and that it would be a great opportunity. And thus far, I have yet to see any lies. I am indeed grateful for the opportunities that OCIC has allowed me and my YPH members to pursue. And because of my intersecting identities as a Muslim Somali woman, my passions extend to fostering gender equality both locally and globally. I envision for myself a future of contributing to progress in my homeland and recognizing the unique challenges faced by Somali women. However, this doesn't diminish the urgent need for gender equality work in the global north. While I aim to return to Somalia to contribute to gender equality efforts, It's essential to acknowledge the existing gaps in the global north, particularly in North America and specifically in Canada. Despite our advancements, we still grapple with pay disparities, underrepresentation of women in leadership roles, and also the pressing need for comprehensive policies addressing workplace discrimination.
Nice to meet you, Yusra. That was amazing. So how about yourself, Ray? Tell us a bit about yourself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ray Jardine, and my pronouns are she, they. I'm calling in tonight from Tuckaronto, or as it's been anglicized, Toronto, but I'm originally from the East Coast. I'm an maritime expat here in Ontario, but have lived here for quite a few years. I'm originally from the land of the Wabanaki. Like the two other panelists tonight, I am a youth policymaker at the Ontario Council for International Cooperation, or OCIC, who you'll hear a little bit more about tonight. But I also wear many hats. I am the founder and executive director of a youth-led organization called Sexual and Reproductive Health and Rights Hubs. It's a loud and proud youth-led organization for sexual and reproductive health and rights. Generally speaking, I can trace my advocacy work back to when I was a child and nobody advocated for me. So I learned those skills to use for myself and then have kind of applied them to other realms of my life. My educational background is in human rights and global development studies. I have been working in particular in sexual and reproductive health and rights for 6 years. I started out in the quote unquote global health space and then decided to try and make some waves here in Canada. And I'm also a consultant, a young parent, and a lot of other things. So those are kind of the perspectives that I bring everywhere I go, including my gender work.
Nice to meet you, Ray. And last but not least, Kezia Odro. Tell us a bit about yourself.
Hello, everyone. Really nice to meet you. Thanks so much for having me, Gecko, and Rachel as well. So echoing everything that everyone said, YPH, Youth Policy Hub Makers, is how I came to get to know everybody. My advocacy journey started, I would say, around high school. I did a lot of grant writing for organizations and grassroots organizations, a lot of youth-led anti-racist, anti-oppression movements, especially in my community of Halton. So that's where I'm originally from. I'm from Halton, Ontario. I lived all around there. I grew up in foster care, so I lived in Burlington, Oakville, Georgetown, Milton, and then as well as in like Hamilton, Wentworth area. So I remember I finished off high school and I was like, okay, I'm going to, take some time and I think I'm going to go into the sciences. And so I did a lot of the sciences. I was in biomedical science and then I was still working in social and nonprofit, like on the side. And so I was like, I'm really into this policy and advocacy stuff. So I think I'm going to, take a moment and then switch programs. But between that time, I really delved into the space of two LGBTQ plus youth-led organizations. So I worked with the Canadian Centre for Gender and Sexual Diversity in youth programming. I was a fundraising coordinator there. I did a lot of fund development. I also then from there, really delved into international relations. So I worked with Dignity Network Canada, as well as coming to OCIC. I then was like, okay, social finance in the international development space is what I'd like and what I want to do. And so now I'm working on the national level with the Children's Aid Foundation Canada, which is a child welfare philanthropic foundation that raises money for youth in care. I work with Propel Impact, which is another youth-led organization that works in teaching youth social finance skills. I really love, gender equality, but in the many spaces that it can exist in, not just, within advocacy. There's a lot of sectors I find that in our province as well as nationally that I can, use my skills to support. So that's what brought me to the space. I currently live in Ottawa, also known as the land of the Anishinaabe Algonquin peoples. I go to UWatewa, and when I switched into political science with a minor in social impact. So that's what's, guiding my work right now. Yeah, thank you so much. I'll pass it back to Darius.
Nice to meet you, Kezia. Yeah, we've got a very impressive group of panelists here. You've definitely instilled a lot more hope back in me for the future. So we're just looking at how things are going. But yeah, so tell us why you feel the engagement of youth in conversations relating to gender equality is necessary. And we'll start this one off with Ray.
Sure, let's jump right into why we're all here. I think that involving youth in conversations about gender equity early is imperative because perspectives and priorities are changing as generations change, and we need that fresh youth engagement to get rid of old ideas and old ways of doing things, and kind of bring forth debate and fresh ideas. But that's not to say that we're going to throw out all the old and bring in new. There's also immense value in intergenerational linking and learning and kind of bridging that old and new together. But right now we're at a really unique time. Our understandings of gender right now are ever evolving at, I would say, probably the fastest time in history. We're at a time where gender is really, really important to youth. Youth want to engage in discussions on this topic in Canada and around the world in this particular moment. In particular, gender diverse youth are being used as a political talking point and a flashbang by people who want to roll back human rights across the board. So if youth are not being part of the discussion and we're not having our say here and now, we're going to be the ones that are cleaning up a big mess down the road when we finally reach that time where we look like the typical high-level officials. Youth bring lived experience and living experience, unique forms of knowledge that are often missing in high-level spaces. We bring an on-the-ground perspective that oftentimes those top-down approaches kind of lack. And we need to be in the spaces to disrupt the paternalistic notion of like, let us tell you what you need, and be there to reflect decisions that actually bring in our experiences and insights. So when I'm often engaging with high-level gender organizations, a reoccurring theme I hear is that they're scrambling because their donor bases are aging, they don't know how to connect with youth, they're not reaching youth, the youth program is faltering, and they're worried that, these long-standing, huge organizations with millions and millions of dollars and 50+ years of existence, there's really a sense that they're going to go under because they no longer resonate. And that's exactly what I think is going to happen. If institutions are not valuing youth now in all their diversity, those spaces and institutions are going to cease to exist if they don't adapt. The same focuses, approaches, and messages are not resonating with youth today, and they're not serving gender agendas going forward. So in summary, if we're not engaging now and engaging youth in discussions, we're going to be in a bad place going forward.
Couldn't agree anymore. So now we will have Yusra.
Thank you. To me, the involvement of youth in conversations about gender equality as an issue is not only a matter of equity, but also a reflection of our commitment to a more inclusive society. As we explore and try to understand the significance of youth and engagement in these discussions, it becomes apparent that the unique perspectives and lived experiences brought by youth are invaluable. As youth, we possess an innate ability to challenge traditional norms and question established structures, providing fresh insights into unique challenges faced by their generation. This is particularly crucial in the realm of gender equality, where outdated norms often persist. As my fellow YCH member Ray just said, reflecting on my own engagement in this space, I have witnessed the transformative power of amplifying youth voices, and by providing a platform for their perspectives, we not only enrich the dialogue, but also ensure that the concerns and experiences of the younger generation are not sidelined. It's through this active involvement that we foster a comprehensive understanding of the multifaceted nature of gender equality. And if we consider the youth-led movements advocating for gender equality, we see that there are passionate individuals who have harnessed the power of social media and grassroots organizations to challenge these societal norms. And these movements have not only sparked conversations, but they've also pressured institutions to reevaluate their policies and practices. One notable aspect is the ability of young people to leverage technology and to create a global network of advocates who share experiences and strategies and support. Take, for example, the social media activism for the genocide in Gaza. We underestimate the power of our youth. They clearly know how to mobilize for a cause. So by harnessing the digital age, the youth have bridged geographical boundaries, forming a collective force that demands change. These success stories underscore the significance of integrating youth perspectives into the discourse surrounding gender equality. However, as we celebrate these achievements, we must also acknowledge the challenges. There are institutions that unfortunately fail to value the diverse opinions of youth, and by dismissing their insights and experiences, these institutions risk perpetuating outdated norms and missing out on innovative solutions to contemporary issues. And within such institutions, a disconnect emerges between the decision makers and those directly affected by their choices. I'm honestly going to just keep reiterating what Ray already said. I think this is a problem that we all recognize. And this lack of representation not only hinders progress, but it also undermines the principle of inclusivity and democracy. Basically, to wrap this up, the engagement of our youth in conversations about gender equality is not merely a desirable addition, but it's imperative. Their fresh perspectives and lived experiences shed light on challenges that older generations may not fully comprehend or just are not privy to. And by fostering a culture that values and includes youth voices, we not only enrich our discussions, but we also pave the way for a more just and equitable society. Thank you.
Absolutely. And now we will move the question on to Kezia. What do you think about this?
Yeah, for sure. So I like the way Ray and Yusra put a bow on it, but I find that within the youth engagement space to begin with, before we even touch gender equality, especially when we're looking at nonprofits, a lot of organizations or senior leadership will establish a lot of performative positions like co-chairs and spaces on boards and things like that. And then they realize maybe 2-3 months in, like, oh, I'm a bit uncomfortable. Like, these kids, they actually have something to say, and like, they're not here just to, provide their perspective. They're here to, actually create something. And I find that within the gender equality space, there's so much free will and space to do that, because it's not a means of system support, but systems change. There's no, systems. So every time it's like we're talking about housing, for example, system support, how can, youth perspective can, but it's like, this is a completely different space where youth perspective is ushering in a new, era of what gender equality looks like. And I think that, as someone who works, in those traditional Western or corporate hierarchical structures, I find that sometimes it's really difficult to stand up and be like, hey, this is, what we need, but not, just to look at your event, but to actually like dismantle, the paternalistic, like Ray said, relationship between the youth that you're trying to serve, or, the communities that you're trying to better serve, and in a broader sense. I think that as well for myself, when I think about gender equality, I find that I read somewhere that we are the generation that manufactured consent. And I thought about that so deeply. And I was like, it's so weird that that's what the older generation sees it as, that we like created something out of nothing, when we're just like, why are you, talking? Why are you not respecting basic, human interactions? And I think that is so weird that we're, creating a whole new, I guess, output of what gender equality looks like, or what, actually having intentional system change, or intentional financing, or intentional, engagement looks like. And I think that OCIC has definitely created a platform that has allowed me to rethink what engagement looks like. It's not transactional. It's more so of a platform that, we give to each other, and being like, hey, we can do this together. We can finish something. We can get to the end. And that is what it looks like it's you're investing into a future that you don't know what it looks like, and I think that that's what's really interesting about youth engagement, and very, very necessary for us right now. But I'll pass it on back to Darius.
Absolutely, and we have to look at it that way. We're investing into a future that we don't really know, but it's really up to the youth to kind of bank in on trying to make the best future that we can possibly have, not only for ourselves and for the next generations that come after us. So now I'm going to key in on Ray here. Nothing personal, but your expertise stands out with this question. So, what challenges do youth have in accessing decision-making processes, and how does the intersecting identities of marginalized genders and youth compound these challenges?
Yeah, you're giving me a tough one. This is a whole panel in and of itself, but I'll do with it what I can. And I'll start with the famous umbrellas of tokenism and ageism. And by that, I mean efforts towards youth that are symbolic, but don't really enact any real change or mean a lot, and prejudice towards youth because of their age. I've worked in global spaces and the domestic space here in Canada, and I always go on the record as saying, I do not think Canada has a strong youth space. We lack the mechanisms, the institutional histories, the precedent, the resources to support true, meaningful youth engagement. In Canada, our first State of the Youth report was only published in 2021 and was largely performative. So we're really decades behind other nations and have a lot of ground to catch up on. So what we see here often is the role of youth to check a box, meet a funder criteria. Youth are expected to kind of show up, listen, smile for the promotional material, but not much else other than that. We're kind of, as Kezia mentioned, like shepherded off to the side via these youth bodies within adult-led organizations that often have very little or real decision-making power, or maybe called in for a consultation or two, and that's it. Or even worse, if you get a larger role or a responsibility, but you're not given credit, or somebody else owns the copyright, then your upward mobility is actually squashed, and it's really hard to make that move from a youth to an adult or a professional or whatever you want the next kind of category to be. So we're seeing this trend where youth are being called upon when it's beneficial to an adult-led entity, but standalone youth-led work is not being supported. And then when we get into these spaces, the stereotypes, the prejudice, the biases, they work against us, and we actually begin to internalize these notions. And they show up as imposter syndrome and burnout. That's why we see people, having a short lifespan in these activist spaces, because it's too much for them to take. And these high-level spaces are intentionally designed. They're not designed to be welcoming and inclusive. They're designed to be exclusionary and elitist. You have to be in the know to even know that they exist, let alone know how to access them. They're often geographically located in some of the most expensive cities in the world, in locations that are gatekept. So for example, we're coming up on the Commission on the Status of Women being held in the United States, where people from the quote unquote global South are being systematically denied visas to enter the country. And we're talking about that a lot as Canadians and kind of shaming the Americans, but the same issues occurred when Canada hosted Women Deliver in 2019. We're not off the hook. This is a running issue with Western nations often having these spaces that have been deemed the high level or the kind of spaces to aspire to. So we've got financial barriers, the cost of travel, being able to take time off work to go and engage in the unpaid labor to go and advocate in these spaces. And you need to be a free agent. Good luck finding a funder that, cares enough to accommodate if you have extra needs, if you're a parent or a caregiver, or your accessibility needs cost a few dollars. When I'm wearing my youth hat, I'll often hear from nonprofits like, oh, you don't understand. Our budget is nickeled and dimed. It's not us. It's that evil funder. There's like this passing of the buck that nobody wants to kind of own up to their role in these structures. But in my nonprofit capacity and as an executive director, I know dealing with funders is not easy. There's ridiculous restrictions, but if you truly budgeted for youth with diverse youth in mind, you would have made sure that their needs were budgeted for and made the effort to find the money elsewhere if you really, really wanted them to participate, or make other arrangements, or at the very least, be transparent with youth beforehand. So we're seeing this trend also where youth are welcomed in these spaces and then find out, oh, I actually can't participate. I selected for this opportunity, but can't participate for these reasons that are kind of working against them and they were never made aware of. And so when events and these high-level forums are planning for youth engagement, they're thinking about youth as a monolith. They're using a one-size-fits-all approach and really ignoring these individualized realities and needs. These spaces don't consider disability, whether physical disabilities or mental health related. They're predominantly white, straight, cis, high-class, well-educated spaces where you can't bring your full self if you don't fit into all those categories. So I'm sure in this room, we all know it, but youth are facing sexism, racism, cis heterosexism, ableism, classism, and so on. And then if you dare speak out about the harms and about these issues, then you're branded as a troublemaker or difficult. And there's 20 more hungry youth waiting in line trying to get an opportunity. So they're not going to bother with you the next time. They're just going to move on to the next, and so on and so on. And we're also seeing this reality where the youth that are privileged to be able to participate in high-level spaces, they're indoctrinated into the spaces, the norms, the values, the way to speak, the way to dress. They have the connections, they have the reputation, the personal brand, and then it's next to impossible for others without that privilege to catch up. So that's, in a nutshell, a few of the things that I see. Kezia, I think you look like you have something to say.
Yeah, I was like, yeah, you said everything. Like, you immediately reminded me of something that just happened. So one of the, I'm on this council called the Young People's Advisory Council for the Children's Aid Foundation Canada, and it is such an enriching experience. And we had someone of their senior leadership say that honorariums aren't income, and we all had to just stop and like look at each other like, girl, like, a lot of us age out of care, like this is definitely income for us. Like this is definitely what we use for our lives. We come and we sit partially and we talk to you guys and we give you insights and we answer on behalf of populations that are not represented here because you don't have the capacity to see outside of the people who've found their way to conform to what you need. And it's really difficult to stand outside of that. There's an institute called the Yellowhead Institute that's actually looking into basically what does radical policy look like, what does growth of a nonprofit look like outside of the corporate scheme that we know, what does land-based leadership look like, what does place-based leadership look like. So I think that once we realize that we don't have to do it the way that they did it, I think that we're going to really break free from these things. We're going to look at the UNCSW as, okay, this is a useless space for us as of the way that we critique it, but we know that once we, learn, the quirks and everything about it, that we can come with a whole new perspective, and we're ushering in a whole new, I guess, like era of what youth engagement looks like. It's difficult. I find that it is difficult, and you are every single step of the way you're trying to navigate something. But I think that if you are intentional and you have, people's insights behind you, you know that there's a reason why you're here, and it's not just to, a check mark on a LinkedIn box or to say I did this or to say I did this. So it's really fun. Once you realize that the stride that you're taking is not for yourself and that you get to actually bring people with you and get to do cool things, and you realize that like, okay, like, yeah, I think that this could be different for the next of us. Yeah, I'll pass it back to you, Darius.
That's awesome. I really like that conversation. And yeah, so now bringing it back over to Kezia, sorry about that, Kezia and Yusra. The two of you are youth policymakers, hub members who were researchers for the report. Can you tell us a bit about the Ontario Council for International Cooperation's report, or OCIC report, into Ontarian youth's challenges in accessing decisions relating to areas that differentially affect marginalized genders. We will start this one off with Kezia.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. I'm actually going to read out to everyone just to give everybody some context as to people who don't know as of right now. So coming up at the beginning of March is the 68th session of the Commission on the Status of Women. It is a session where civil society, government, or organizations, or not organizations, but ministries come together, UN entities, all come around from all around the world. But as Ray mentioned, a lot of people are still excluded because of a lot of bureaucracy. Come together to talk about recommendations relating to gender equality. And so this year, the priority theme is accelerating the achievement of gender equality and the empowerment of all women and girls by addressing poverty and strengthening institutions and financing with a gender perspective. Okay, a mouthful. I don't know who was working back. I don't know what the marketing team was doing anyways. And then the review theme for this year as well as social protection system, access to public services, and sustainable infrastructure for gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls. And so there are already agreed conclusions to that. In this space, we'll be looking at the Beijing Declaration from last time. We'll be looking at the I don't know, can someone help me out? It's the CEDAW, the commitment against, I will have to search it up, but it is another entity that they'll be looking at when they are at CSW. And so this year, UN Women has decided to have like a very youth led perspective. On the Thursday that we go, that there's going to be like basically a youth specific day where youth come for an interactive dialogue. And we'll mostly be talking about the global adolescent youth recommendations that Rachel, Yusra, and our other members from YPH work together on. So Rachel is a member of GECO's board of directors, and Yusra you see here, and as well as our other member, Raja, worked together on a report, and we submitted it. Rachel and Yusra led data collection, so they worked with focus groups about talking about financing and poverty. Honestly, it's really interesting, and I think that in the social finance space that I work in, it's been really like kind of different to reorient it to look at what it looks like in a G7 country. A lot of youth are talking about education and what does it look like to change the landscape for learning about financing and learning about economic literacy. It's not just about, your savings or your budgets or class consciousness. Like a lot of these youth know what that is, but as class consciousness is growing, like what is that turning to? Where is all this, awareness going to? Where are we funneling it into so that we can, learn how to change these systems? A lot of us don't know where our taxes go. A lot of us don't know what positionality to access mean. A lot of us don't know what, little things that we were told that we're supposed to do, like set up a TFSA account, or what is the return on an investment. We learn about all these like entrepreneurial skills, but not in relation to anything, not in relation to the world or to even America or even to, quote unquote, the global South. So it's really interesting. I think that this specific, I'll let you sort of talk about it more in our report, but this specific topic is really interesting because it's addressing a mechanism rather than a problem. There is a specific need for understanding financing and poverty because it's a tool to fix things like climate education and the tool to fix things like housing and all the other issues that are linked to gender equality. So I think that youth are really excited about this theme, but as well as like we're being stifled. We're being told to put our eyes elsewhere. And so it's been interesting to see how to reorient that and keep the focus for the future. But I'll pass it on to Yusra.
Okay, so a little bit more about the report that me and my YPH members did. I believe we got the call for submissions for the youth report recommendations around late November, where we were tasked as delegates to conduct youth and or adolescent-led consultations within our network, as well as within OCIC's very far-reaching network to discuss the CSW 68 priority theme, which I believe, this is not verbatim, but it's to do with advancing gender equality with a financial lens, I want to say. And by the time that my group and I had decided to go along with this, it was a very tough time. I believe it was early December, which meant that a lot of people had holiday plans. A couple of us were going to be out of the country. Everybody that we wanted to consult in our focus groups had probably already, like figured out what their holiday plans were. So it was very hard to coordinate everything, as well as we had a very constrained timeline. I believe it was due January 15th, which gave us approximately 1 month to compile our data from the focus groups that, as Kezia said, me and Rachel held. We held them, I want to say late December, so we were really pushing that timeline. So we had like approximately 1 month to make a survey, to compile the data from the survey, to hold focus groups and compile the data from the transcripts, and turn that into one comprehensive report that we would subsequently send to UN Women. And thankfully, we got it done in time. It was a very bumpy ride, but I'm proud of us. We did very well. And shout out to Kezia. I've never said this before, but I didn't know that a report could be so beautiful. Shout out to you that you made the report so beautiful. And some of the challenges that our youth in our consultations as well as in our surveys reported had to do with age, representation of women and girls in financial spaces, education, lived versus professional experience, and how, I guess, youth and their lived experiences are not credited as much as professional experience would be, as well as intersecting identities. I can read a little sneak peek of our report. I think this is a really, on representation of women and girls, I know that a lot of the youth that we consulted and the youth in our surveys brought up this challenge. And I have a quote that I think echoes the sentiment that we've been reiterating. I'm gonna read it. Most decision makers on finances are men in their 60s. This gives society the perception that they're the ones who have the best understanding and should be the ones in charge of policies and practice. However, if younger people can contribute, their needs will be understood. They'll be incorporated into these programs and policies and can be designed to better suit everybody. I think this is something that we have been reiterating this entire panel. As well as, I believe they talked about age, and youth reported that their age is something that was a hindrance to their agency in discussions surrounding financing, rather than youth perceiving their age as an obstacle. Adults were the one who perceived youth as lacking the experience to be a part of this discussion. And I think in order for us to live in a more equitable world, we need a bit of both. We need the youth perspective as well as the perspective of those who have the experience. So it's not just one or the other. We need a collaboration of both. And I can pass it on to Kezia to talk a little bit more about our key recommendations on our work.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm just putting into the chat right now the global youth and adolescent recommendations. So they titled it Poverty Eradication, Strengthening Institutions, and Gender Transformative Financing. Honestly, it's so cool to see it all to come together. There's a lot of I guess different areas that they decided to I guess break it down into. A lot of what we spoke about was in strengthening financing institutions, engagement, as well as education. So when it came down to breaking I guess the recommendations, like coming to the ideas of them, I took what Yusra and Rachel had written about, their experiences, a lot of the sentiments that they were echoing, basically a lot what Yusra was saying just now about the quote, and then making them high level and seeing what are they doing up there, those UN councils, what are they doing, and why hasn't this been addressed yet, and seeing obviously like reduce silos, don't repeat something that somebody else has said. So I can go over them a little loosely. I find that when talking about addressing the UN, I find that they are very performative in the way that they try to package up all these things, because they end up saying the same thing in multiple summits over and over again, and you can tell that youth are like, it's time to streamline this and streamline it in a way where it's like someone else didn't say this, but you had written it as your agreed conclusion, and now we're about to say it again at the next commission, and it's the same conclusion that you had come up with. So it's very interesting. I really like the way that they had packaged the adolescent recommendations, because they referred back to conclusions that were made in the 67th session. I can read out some of our recommendations now. So, for example, as we know, the Sustainable Development Goal number 4 is called quality education. So we had written about actionable plans to support, I live in Centertown, Ottawa. It's a lot. Anyway, so actionable plans to support Target 4.4 and Target 4.71. So this is about like specific skills. This is expanding it to the metrics and key performance indicators to include basic to advanced objectives of financial literacy at all education levels. And this isn't things that are like foreign, like these are already things that are like mandated into like the Nordic Council of Cooperation's mandate. Like these are like, there are people in the global south, there are organizations in the global south that have partnered up with different churches and different small primary schools to expedite what financial literacy looks like regionally. And so it's not like it's not something that's foreign. It's literally G7 countries who just don't, have the means, don't have, like Ray was saying, like we're very behind on youth engagement. And I think that says a lot about what we can do to better address our needs, as well as there's the UN Youth Report on Financial Inclusion. And so there's a specific quote from the report that said, for these kinds of initiatives to achieve greater outreach and impact, ideally they should be supported by youth-focused financial literacy national strategies. So as we know, Canada has no national body that goes through education. So that's why we're seeing a lot of the family policing that's happening in different provinces and when it comes to like education, because there's no mandate on what can and cannot be said or what is and is not said. So a lot of things are streamlined, but then there's some things that are left out. There's another conference as well called the Global Social and Financial Skills Conference that's held in Utrecht. And only 6 countries and 9 organizations from the G7 endorsed the document, and no North American country signed it. So there's a lot of pushing forward of like, what is like a big systems change and what does that look like? I think another thing that I really enjoyed about the report was a lot of UN reports and a lot of statements that are submitted to the council don't have a lens about decolonialism and decolonization. And we had a whole section. We said decolonize, and we came with really good reports. And so it's been really interesting to even go through the other youth-led organizations and just scrolling and seeing if I can search up and see what they wrote about. I think that 8,000 youth across the world is robust, and I'm hoping to hear and see what they say on this platform, because it's an interesting year, specifically for Canada. And Ray and I heard a little bit about this from a colleague, and one really interesting thing, we had someone from our delegation talk about, went to the Global Affairs Canada briefing, and the Ministry of Women and Gender and Equality are trying to shift Canada's perspective to the eradication of poverty rather than strengthening financing institutions. And it's like, well, this is what we're talking about. This is the theme. So how can we reorient into what we need and how we can better support our areas? And we did a really good job of talking about people that aren't here. And I know there's a question later talking about it, but like youth residing in rural areas, youth with experience in the child welfare system, youth with disabilities, youth identifying within sexual orientations, gender identities, gender expressions, immigrants, refugees, different class breakdowns. So it's broad, it's very broad, and I don't want to like jargon, but please take a look at the PDF if you can. I know they haven't published it anywhere, but definitely keep your eyes out on that and amplify it if that closely aligns with any of the organizations or the work that you're doing. All right, I'll pass it back to you, Darius.
Thank you. Yeah, there's a lot of information said right there, but yeah, definitely everybody keep an eye out for the report and definitely keep those recommendations in mind because again, this is the future that we're looking to invest in. So since the commission on the status of women or the CSW 68 is continually coming up, I'd just like to quickly mention that Gecko is actually sending a delegation who will be presenting at the 68th session. So just in case some people aren't familiar, the theme of the commission will be addressing poverty and financing through a gendered perspective to accelerate the push towards gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls. So it's definitely worth keeping an eye on because a lot of important information is streaming through this commission, and a lot of the key projects that we see that change a lot of things and help a lot of people all over the world come out of these commissions. So definitely, keep an eye out on that, and yeah, and you take a look at some of the files that Casey is sending because a lot of this information is going to be streaming through a number of different channels that might be echoed at the commission as well. So, okay, so now to loop everyone back in. How does society need to shift in order to make sure diverse voices, including the voices of youth, are heard such that conversations and decisions around gender identities, discrimination, and empowerment can include everybody? And we will have Kezia start this one off for us.
Yeah, for sure. I just finished off that little blurb that I was reading about youth residing in all those different areas, but I will talk about a space and a home that is close to my heart. I'm from Ghana, West Africa, and as of right now, Parliament just passed the anti-LGBTQ plus bill, and so the most notable LGBT plus organization in that area is led by Kofi Donkor, and he is a youth, and he's been running this organization from his phone, but he's holding it down. And his organization has 18K on Instagram, and he just talks about resources for LGBTQ plus youth. But it's just really interesting to see that space now has to be shut down for his safety and for his, and for the safety of others who interact with those platforms. I'm finding that in specifically when it comes to gender discrimination and gender diverse youth, there needs to be a new lens when it comes to what does it look like to actually engage with the spaces that are perpetuating this hate? And it's difficult to wrap your head around, but I think that you're seeing a lot of initiatives pop up about what does religious intervention mean, or what does faith-based therapy look like, and entering those spaces and really creating like a shift in ideology. I think that more specific funds and more specific engagement opportunities that we've seen happen for Indigenous youth or Black youth needs to be also streamlined for 2S LGBTQ plus youth. I'm finding that it's really difficult to hold an intersectional perspective when I'm only there and being regarded as a Black person or just someone who's been in care. So I think that youth who proudly champion all sections of their identity will create more visibility for others in the space. And so that's what I'm finding is probably what's going to have to happen. It's going to be definitely like a movement, but I hope it happens individually as well. And I hope that people feel empowered to talk about who they are and to talk about what specifically about their experience brings them to advocate for gender diverse youth, as well as the other communities that they're a part of. I'll pass it to Ray.
Thank you. Yeah, a few shifts that I've kind of spent some time mulling over. The first is I think we really need to get comfortable being uncomfortable. This notion of comfort above all else is white supremacy. So like unlearning and making mistakes is okay. I don't know how many spaces I've been in where it's like proclaimed that like this space is decolonial, it's hierarchy free, it's whatever, whatever, and we're still defaulting to the same structures and the same approaches because people don't feel comfortable enough to like make mistakes. It's not a bad thing to say, I screwed up, I should have done this, acknowledge it, learn from it, move on. I think that's something that's really missing in these spaces where we're engaging in discussions of gender and trying to engage diverse voices. I think there's also a big need for self-reflectiveness, knowing when to sit down, when to listen, when to step back, say no, when to pass an opportunity on to someone else. If you say no to an opportunity, you're not going to like perish as a professional. It's okay to say, you know, this person knows better than I do about this topic. In particular, we need adult-led organizations and high-level officials to be passing opportunities to youth and youth-led organizations. Some other shifts, we need the institutional structures to be able to respond to the unique realities of diverse youth and youth-led work. These kind of one-fits-all standards of what's the best, of like, you know, funders expecting 10 years of spotless bureaucracy and audited financial reports, and all that kind of stuff without resourcing youth and youth-led organizations makes it next to impossible for us to do the kind of work we want to do. And on the flip side, we're seeing the same thing where we're expecting professionals to have 10 years of experience and a fancy titled job so that they can do high level work in this space, which we need to tear that apart. We need to tear apart that hierarchy of what's knowledge, what experience looks like, and really look at diversifying, recognizing people, organizations, and movements kind of outside of these narrow conceptions. And I think a big part of it is shying away. We need to stop shying away from the serious, from the negative, and kind of break out of this Canadian niceness where we always want to be diplomatic and not really call something what it is. We need to be having hard conversations, demanding better. You know, simple things like breaking away from the discourse that youth and equity deserving folks need to be empowered is vital. We don't need people to save in and swoop in, save the day, and give people that authority or push they need to realize themselves. And we need to be saying that, or else we're going to see, you know, the same language, the same approaches here 10 years from now. And it really comes down to, for me, the need to break silos. We're all kind of off in our little worlds. We need to be communicating more, collaborating more with each other, finding more community and competing less. And we need to be engaging more together as youth, but also intergenerationally, so merging youth and adult perspectives.
Absolutely. And Yusra, tell us how you feel about this as well.
Well, in my opinion, in order for society to shift, I think that oh, sorry, pardon. Oh, sorry, I thought you were going to say something. It's your mic was on and it moved, so I was sorry. I was saying, in order for society to shift, we must, like, I think this is something that's very important, amplify diverse voices and not just youth voices. I think that we need varied perspectives, and I think that this should be done by actively seeking out and elevating individuals from these various backgrounds, which ensures a wide range of perspectives and experiences that can be included in these discussions, specifically like financial discussions. It's also important to promote inclusivity and to create these inclusive spaces where people of all ages and genders and identities feel comfortable expressing themselves without the fear of judgment, while also valuing youth input and acknowledging the value of their insights and experiences and ideas that they bring to discussions on gender issues. I believe that by providing an education that fosters the understanding of diverse gender and identities and experiences, that we can move forward with this. Empowering youth through platforms that enable them to share their thoughts and actively participate in decision-making processes is another way that I think we can do this. I think it's also very important to recognize the role of older people, people with more experience than us youth, specifically those in positions of power and how they play into this. There's this belief that with age comes wisdom, which I'm not gonna lie is, obviously a little bit true, but this also brings about this negative connotation regarding youth. But I think we forget that youth brings fresh perspectives and novel ideas. This is not to say like, kick out the elderly. I'm not an ageist. But I think that again, I'm just gonna reiterate the same point I've been reiterating this entire panel, but there needs to be an equitable solution. Like we can't just have youth perspectives and we can't just have perspectives of those who have the experience that youth don't have. There needs to be like a healthy mix of the two. Again, challenging that age bias and challenging the stereotypes related to age and recognizing that youth can contribute meaningfully to discussions regarding gender and finance. Also, like again, what I said before, leveraging technology to create inclusive platforms for discussions, making it easier for diverse voices, like anyone of any age, of any gender, of any intersecting identity, to be heard globally. And by implementing these shifts, I believe that society can work towards ensuring that conversations and decisions around gender identities, discrimination, and empowerment are truly inclusive and representative of the diversity within our communities.
Absolutely. I definitely agree that, we can't be knocking, each other's age groups down, because we're at the end of the day, we're going to end up repeating the same cycles that we see. We, want to look down on the older generations or the more seasoned generations. And then we end up, becoming that seasoned generation. And then we say, oh, the youth don't know any better than me because I have all the lived experiences. So, we don't want to. And I mean, I can't say that I'm, innocent of that. I look at my siblings and say the same thing, So it's just like we have to be able to incorporate all the fresh perspectives because you never know. These different perspectives definitely build a lot of the structures that we need to see. But yeah, so as mentioned before, these conversations, the panels that we're having, the panel that we're having right now, are meant to build the bridges or foundations for change. And a lot of youth want to be a part of that change, but don't know exactly where to start. So what would be your best advice for a young person watching today, or maybe you saw them walking on the street and they came up to you, any of the events you're at, what would you tell them to, if they're looking to get more involved in gender-based activism? Ray, what would be your best, sell for them to get them going?
I'm actually going to push back on your best sell, and it's funny you come to me first because I'm about to really derail this question, but I ask everybody to stay with me and hopefully we can eventually get us all to the point. I have gotten more comfortable over the years. Instead of jumping right in and telling youth how to engage in this work, my advice over the years has kind of faltered back to, let's take a step back. Let's think this through. More now than ever, we're at, as I've said before, a time where we're seeing unprecedented attacks on human rights in this country. We're inching towards an election that is concerning, to say the least, for gender work. We're coupled with funding inequities and austerity and cost of living crisis. It's extra hard to be engaging in this kind of work and these kinds of spaces right now. So my background, I come from low-resourced grassroots work is where my heart and soul lives. I've been doing this for quite a few years, and I've kind of seen the patterns and what happens to people who kind of rush right into this work and get kind of consumed by it. And when we're talking about gender-related activism, it has to be said that this is a really big category. So there's nuance depending on what type of work you want to get in. But overall, I have really been urging people more and more to make informed decisions, spend some time thinking about safety, security, and self-care when you're engaging in this work. And I don't say that to scare or deter folks from engaging in these fantastic spaces. I say it to set new activists up for success and longevity in this type of work and center their well-being. In Canada, especially, we tend to downplay the severity of issues and, as I've kind of said before, be all positive, but there are legitimate risks to doing this work that I don't think we talk a lot about, especially if you're engaging in issues in gender-based work that center around the difficult topics. If you're advocating for abortion, if you're advocating for trans rights, if you're advocating for the rights of sex workers, but even if you're engaging in low risk gender work, I kind of urge people not to feel too comfortable that things can never happen, because we're seeing a lot of never evers and firsts play out in real times. I think we're not getting enough of a platform to talk about the serious harm that's happening to folks working in this space. In recent years, it seems to be happening more and more, especially in cases where your activism or your profile has a digital footprint, which can't be taken back. So kind of thinking about some of these things beforehand, and we're combating new harms. We've got technological facilitated gender-based violence. We've got doxing. We've got cyber attacks. There's a lot of things that, you know, we're engaging with in this work now, and I'm dealing with, you know, on a monthly basis, that I wouldn't even have known what doxing was or heard this terminology before when I got started doing this work. So I think you have to know what you're in it for, what the potential risks are, and also set boundaries with yourself and others from day one. There's this trend of burnout in the sector where you do this work for a couple years, give your all, and then you burn out, and then the next generation come in. So we're missing that, you know, that sharing of knowledge, that institutional kind of passing the baton. So really checking in with yourself, thinking about not only what good can you do for the community or the world, but also asking, is the work serving you personally or is it harming you? You know, things like asking for help, leaning on community. I wish those things were put into my head when I started this work. And, you know, taking a page from the work of Tricia Hershey and the NAP ministry, self-care and wellness are resistance. Kind of the people who don't want to see gender equity and other forms of intersectional equity realized are counting on, and they're actively facilitating, our exhaustion and burnout. They want the people doing gender equity work to be too exhausted and too burned out to organize and work together. And they're doing that on purpose. So while they're actively seeking to tear the community of activists apart, let's spend some time putting in the work to actually build ourselves up and build up this space so that we can do the best work that we want to see. So while I wouldn't give that, you know, that speech to somebody if I met them on the street, if an activist came to me really looking to get into this space and get more involved, these would be the kind of conversations that I'd be having with them, because they're the conversations that I wish it didn't take me years to kind of figure out for myself.
Absolutely, and that's important. But honestly, if you just met me on the street, I'd be sold. How about yourself, Yusra? What advice would you give somebody that's interested in getting into gender-based activism?
To get more involved in gender-based activism, I would suggest probably educating yourself on gender issues. I believe having a good foundation is very important. You can do this by reading books, articles, research papers on gender issues to gain a deeper understanding. And then this would provide like a comprehensive understanding of the historical context, societal structures, and systemic inequalities that contribute to gender disparities. This knowledge would help you form the basis for informed and targeted advocacy efforts, as well as to reiterate what Ray said. Many people are unaware of the risk that comes with this advocacy, and I believe that educating yourself and knowing beforehand the risks that come with this advocacy work, you can keep yourself from harm. You can take the time to listen to various different perspectives by seeking out voices from diverse backgrounds, experiences, and identities. This is important because gender-based advocacy seems to address a myriad of issues that impact individuals from diverse and varied backgrounds, and listening to these voices with varied perspectives and experiences is absolutely invaluable and very important for advocacy work. A commitment to inclusivity would ensure a more comprehensive understanding of the challenges faced by different groups. This again will lead to a more authentic and genuine gender-based advocacy. And for any type of advocacy, I would recommend any of this. You can attend discussions, forums, events where different perspectives on gender are shared, kind of like this one. And by staying informed about current events, you can, sorry, I don't know what I said that. You can engage in conversations, support organizations like GECKO or OCIC that work to advance gender equality. You can use your voice to raise awareness, as we've seen from the social media activism for Palestine. You can do a lot with social media and just with your voice. You don't need a large organization backing you. There's power in people, you know, just go out there and fight for what you believe in. Being an ally, advocating for change, and challenging stereotypes in places are essential steps in contributing to any cause. And by combining all of these actions, you can actively contribute to gender-based activism in any sector and help create a more equitable and inclusive society.
Absolutely. And Kezia, well, how would you, like, what would you tell somebody that came up to you looking for some advice?
Yeah, for sure. So I definitely agree and don't want to shy away from the idea of education and learning about the space. But I think adjacently, if you don't know much about the space, but you're eager to solve a problem, learn a skill. I find that is really helpful in understanding the actual, like, I guess, inner workings of a nonprofit. So as some people may know, like a space, or I guess like a skill that's growing a lot in nonprofit is monitoring and evaluation. And everyone's like, what's MAL, what's MAL, what's MAL? And then once you enter the space, you're like, oh, this is impact measurement, or oh, this is capacity building. And so it really helps to understand a specific skill. I think that we are in a very capitalistic world where it's like, learn a skill, commodify it. But if you try to make that outward instead of inward, I guess it leads me to my next point, which is don't see your peers as competition, but rather collaborators. It actually just won't help you. First of all, it won't help you because you're not going in the same space. You're not going for the same positions, and you're going to be like individually putting yourself in a silo. It wouldn't work for you. And it's like, somehow we talk about reducing silos, but we forget that ourselves is the first one that we shouldn't close off and try to streamline ourselves into, oh, we're gonna finish this, or we're gonna do this, or oh, I want my name published on this. Like it won't work, and you won't be able to see where it grows. Roots are never contained. They're always, they go and they connect with other trees, and the same is for us. I think once I actually put that into practice, I realized that on the other side, although my peers aren't collaborators, people who aren't in my spaces, so for example, maybe they're in arts and culture, or maybe they're in tech, or maybe they're in another space, like they are also my collaborators. So those can create, connections of like creating something new. So in the same way where you're looking around in your room, you're like, oh, there's another business student who I have to fight for an internship with, or oh, there's another, person that I have to fight for a spot on a council for. Like, that isn't I guess that's not the motive, and you shouldn't try to lead with that. You should try to see every opportunity as a way to collaborate. And then from there, if you don't get on something, or if you don't achieve something to the best of your abilities, you know that you've learned something from the space, because collaborators don't just make things happen, they teach each other. And so I think that was definitely for me how I was able to, it sounds really weird, but like get over myself and just make myself realize that like I can take time for myself, and like Ray said, like and be intentional with my work, and I can be intentional with my my endeavors, because I know that at the end of the day, it's not just me who I'm leaning on, and I also have the same amount of care that somebody else would, and it really helps you cultivate someone with like people with like similar interests and things like that. So don't don't knock your friends out. Don't knock your peers out. They're there to teach you how to better understand the space. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So now at this time, I'd really like to open up the floor to the audience to ask any questions, either verbally, just putting your hands up and you'll be called upon, or through the chat. And yeah, I'll just leave this floor empty for a couple minutes to see if any questions pop up, or if anybody has anything now. We'll be happy to take on the questions.
I see one in the chat from Rachel for Ray.
Yeah, so the question for Ray is, or anybody really, yeah, so do the panels have any resources or recommendations for alternative advocacy spaces? Are there any organizations or spaces that are doing accessibility well in the sector, whom others can learn from?
I can start that one off. Spaces that are doing well. I always say in this discussion, I think the global north needs to look to the global south. I had the privilege to spend years learning from colleagues in the East African space. They have been doing this for a decade. They've got resources. They have mentorship programs where before, somebody is sent to a delegation, they're put in contact and kind of trained by the person who went before them, and so on and so forth. There is entities in Europe. One that kind of comes to mind is called Choice for Youth. They are big in the sexual and reproductive health and rights space. They have a lot of policies and resources about, how do we get youth into these big spaces? But also they're big on supporting other forums. One of my favorite kind of counter spaces, Femnet, which is an African organization, just held a big event that's called Africa Disrupt CSW. So there's a lot. If you're looking at the grassroots spaces, if you're looking outside of kind of the North American bubble, there is a lot of amazing spaces where we can learn from, and people are beginning more and more to talk about the visa issues. So more and more spaces are coming up. There's an official UN Forum for Youth Friday and Saturday. This is a little bit of a shameless plug, but my organization, SRHR Hubs, is hosting an Global Community Forum on Monday, which is kind of a no bars access, where we're going to be actually talking about in access. So for me, it's in the grassroots, it's in the whisper networks, it's in the youth networks. Find out the youth that are passionate and feel the same way that you do about things, and kind of follow that trail. And you'll find the resources and you'll find the alternative spaces. It's make those connections with people that have the same values that you do.
Absolutely. Following in the footsteps is definitely a huge thing that a lot of folks should always do. And again, I think from my perspective, it's really important that, again, we look at the people around us that want to work as collaborators, and we allow the folks that want to see themselves in the same spaces as collaborators, and we allow them to follow us in our footsteps, or bring them alongside to make their own footsteps for themselves in this trek. So yeah, so KZ, you have your hand up. You have anything to add?
I was gonna add to this, not so much in the international development space, but more so in the national advocacy space. Shameless plug as well. I work at Future of Good, and we are hosting at the end of March the Changemaker Wellbeing Summit. So I'll link it in the chat so that everyone can take a look. It's in collaboration with cooperators. It's basically, I can just read a little bit about it, but the 2024 Summit will host a mix of talks and practical workshops, discussions, peer learning, and artistic experiences on critical topics such as mental health, sleep, financial precarity, maternal health, intergenerational trauma, inclusion and belonging, climate anxiety, and more. And so if you are just a youth just looking to understand the space more and understand what this new, I guess, what does it look like to be an intentional change maker and to actually care about yourself, because you know that that's what you're basically putting forth at the end of the day. I definitely think you should check it out. Coming in the next, by the end of the year, you guys should hear from Social Innovation Canada as well, from a Changemakers Wellbeing series that they are starting. So yeah.
Okay, so there's a couple more questions, and thank you for sharing. Definitely encourage everybody to check that out. So there was a mention of collaborating older and younger generations to bring youth opinions into the decisions being made. How can we ensure that youth trust that older adult? If I feel like many youth have a difficult time connecting and trusting the seasoned generations, how can we make it work? Sandra had that question. I don't know who. Does anybody have anything to say? I'll give you a couple.
I can say, yeah, I can say, I guess a bit about this. I think this is a very interesting question, I find, because of specifically the child welfare space. So the child welfare space has always been addressed first as a, can everyone hear me okay? Okay, perfect. So the child welfare space has always been approached not from the social impact space, but from the governmental space, because it is a provincial I guess, entity. And so after the Truth and Reconciliation calls happened, that is when we saw a lot of advocacy pop up that's now being recognized a little bit more. And it's very, very difficult to get youth who've been out of care to come back and talk about what that means and how it means to better support the space. And I think the main issue is that the older generation is also not willing to say that you don't know, or that you don't understand, or that I'm willing to learn, or that I'm going to be vulnerable. I think it's really difficult to switch from a point of view where it's like you don't know nothing now and that we are here to educate. And it doesn't have to be as explicit as that, but once you share vulnerability and not understanding, it's easier for youth to also, connect. And I think about like child development psychology and like how like kids learn from people who are also doing, and I think that is how I'm able to connect with older generations, is because they're able to come to me and be like, hey, we have gone to like 3 external consultants about this because we don't know what we're doing. These are all our reports. Help me, put this together. Or, hey, we don't know what it looks like to start a social media campaign, and we have all this money. We have the, the opportunity and the ability to teach you how to manage it, but show us creatively what that looks like. So just, I think there's a sense of vulnerability that needs to be placed on, and I think that I want Ray to speak on this because I'm also still learning in this space, and I'm finding that I'm trying to learn from people, but it's really difficult to also not fall into the pattern of like just dimming myself down. So I'll pass it on to somebody else.
Yeah, sure. Something that I've kind of noticed over the years is when we're engaging in the nonprofit spaces or the change-making spaces, and oftentimes our projects have timelines that are imposed by the funders. One thing I see repeated often is when we're getting adults and youth together, is we're expecting it to happen under these really unrealistic funding timelines. It takes time to build out the relationships. You can't just throw a group of 60 plus professionals in the room with people who are 15 and 16 and say, okay, there, work together. I think one of the key things is like actually taking the time. You have to build that comfort, build that rapport, kind of like break down the stereotypes. I feel like in our sector, we're rushing a lot of that. I feel like there's a lot of pre-work that needs to be done. So that's one of the things, is taking the time to find the commonalities, breaking down those preconceived notions and not expecting it to happen, in like an 8-hour consultation day. So I think we need to have a lot more intentionality in the way that we're setting up these spaces. And also thinking about, again, if we're putting adults and youth into the same spaces where the power dynamics play out, if we're in a boardroom versus if we're in an more unstructured, comfortable environment, kind of being really thoughtful about how we're setting those spaces up and how we're coming into them, I think is really key to the intergenerational piece. There's a lot to it, more than just throwing people in a room, all to say.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are really good questions. I don't know if Yusra had anything to say. If not, we can move on to the next question. I think we can move on to the next question. Okay, so we got another question from Kanwal. How can we ensure that gender equality education is accessible and appealing to a diverse range of youth? And what are the main obstacles we or you faced in engaging youth in gender equality discussions? It's a very good question. No worries, Yusra.
Yusra needs a second, so I can kind of step in on this. This is something I feel very, very passionate about as somebody who is privileged to have a human rights background. I think advocating for knowledge about these spaces, about these movements in formalized education, but also in other spaces. But the question on obstacles and engaging youth on topics on gender equality, one of the hats I wear is I'm a sex educator. So oftentimes in the gender movement and in the sex educator realm, we are, fighting the good fight, putting ourselves of the people who believe in this and the people who don't, and like making this binary on the spectrum. But one of the ways that I have found most fruitful when I'm engaging in my work is stepping back from that and seeing, okay, where are commonalities? I'm never going to change somebody's mind who has complete divergent views of everything I hold near and dear in my heart. So that education piece for me is stepping in and finding, okay, what are they comfortable with? So if I'm engaging in conversations on gender, I'm with people who aren't, wanting those discussions to happen. I start on the lower end of the spectrum. Okay, I'm not going to run right into discussing trans rights. I might build in some of the same skill sets into a educational setting, without saying, oh, this is sex education, use this for sex, or use this to advocate for gender. You can kind of find ways to find your common ground and get to the same end goal just by using little tips and tricks and different methods. So instead of rushing right in and kind of like fighting the good fight on gender equality and all those kinds of things, can we start a little slower? Can we build, I teach toddlers sex ed. I start with, these are your body parts and you can say no if somebody takes your toy. That later is foundational and it builds to become a skill later on in their life in more serious settings. So oftentimes for me, in getting that education piece out, is taking things back a few notches and not just running in as like the gender defenders.
Yeah, I can add to this. I was going to say that appealing to a diverse range of youth also means that it's okay to diversify the way that you engage with youth. We learn differently. We understand differently, and I think that's why it's really important that we continue to support like the arts and music and culture and things that aren't as like academic as we may seem, because we all take in and understand information completely differently. I am a visual learner, but when I hear someone articulately like say something or like write something, I can really engage with the work and what they're saying. I believe that there's a power in words, but there's also a power in art. There's power in a bunch of different ways, and so I think that it requires a bit of thought as to how to reach youth in, I guess, the marginalized spaces, but also how are you doing that in a way that hasn't been seen before? Are we posting job postings on LinkedIn for the, like Ray said earlier, the honed and already conformed youth, or are we, going to like youth specific initiatives, and are we going to, people who may be connected to different areas and being like, hey, this is what we're doing. We want to engage with youth that are like this. We don't know what's going on, but we're willing to learn. And if they steer us in a different direction, we are okay with that. I think that is, I really liked what Ray said about being uncomfortable, because I actually had a senior leader say, I am uncomfortable. And we all had to sit there and be like, girl, like, yes, you should be uncomfortable. Like, we're trying to dismantle whole systems. Like, it is okay to make it uncomfortable. So find different ways to engage with youth, because it's not just about resource giving, but allow them to come to you and be like, hey, open calls, reduce all the barriers, age limits. We're now talking 35 now when it comes to youth. When we're talking about internet access, we're now saying, hey, we can now give you stipends for laptops or for internet. So it's time to, get in their shoes and be like, if you were given every single possibility, like, how would you, what would you take it to? And I think that is what I'm seeing about like the championers and the people who are doing it right. They're like, we've gotten, laptops, headphones, internet access, stipends, vacation days. And these are people who are just consulting for us. And so we just want them to know that we care about them. We care about the relationship that we're trying to cultivate, and we want them to bring their networks to us, because that's the only way that these mandates can grow. Is just by diversifying your methods. So yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. So, because of timing, and there's one more question that I wanted to get to. Yeah, so I just honestly, it was an incredible conversation. I definitely learned a lot. Just because much as I am a moderator, I was definitely just as much as an audience member as everybody else. So a common takeaway that I have is really, the need for the youth engagement is at an unprecedented high, and on top of that, youth engagement can do so much, for our communities when we see that engagement and work put into these projects. Obviously, not to knock on, seasoned generations, and as we've mentioned a few times in this panel, we don't want to be knocking on the seasoned generations, but it comes a time where we do need to kind of clear the way for the up and coming youth and upcoming generations, so that we can bring in the fresh perspectives, because we all understand that society it's not a solidified thing. It's a very fluid thing. So it changes each and every day. Something new comes out of society every single second. So, we have to be able to understand that, I have a different understanding that what my younger brother may have. So I can't really just say my way is the only way. My brother, who is, 12 years younger than me, has a whole different perspective on how things work. So I have to take into it. We might have the same, childhood for the most part, whatever, but his perspectives will still be very different, based on his experiences. So yeah, I'd really like to thank Yusra, Kezia, and Ray on behalf of everyone for your time. It's been a pleasure hearing what you folks have to say, and what you've been doing, outside of the panel for, trying to create a better community and an equal community. But there is one more question, like I mentioned, that I'd like to ask. And so for anybody in the audience, how are they able to really keep up with what you're doing, and maybe even help out with in being that collaborator in the future? And Yusra, Yusra, how about we start off with you?
For starters, if you'd like to learn more about us, you can go onto the OCIC website. You can read our bios, and you can learn a little bit more about what we do as YPH members and what we're going to be doing as CSW 68 delegates. If anybody wants to drop their LinkedIn, I'm about to find my LinkedIn. You can contact us on LinkedIn. I know some of us want to share our emails. You can contact us through there. through our LinkedIn's, I'm pretty sure you can find all the other things that we do. Me personally, I am an OPERS board member. You can learn a little bit more about me through there. Anybody wants to add anything else?
Yeah, Ray, how can folks keep up with you?
Yeah, you can find me in a lot of spaces like my colleagues. OCIC is one way to find me. Also my organization SRHR Hubs. I'm also a youth working group member at CanWatch, the Canadian Partnership for Women's and Children's Health. You might see me out as an independent consultant in the world. You might find me on social media. I'll put some links in the chat. I'm always happy to chat with folks. If you see me somewhere, stop in and say hi. I tend to be around these kinds of spaces.
Perfect. And Kezia, how can
Thank you. I'm going to put my LinkedIn in the chat for anyone who wants to say hi. Same as Ray, consulting for LGBTQ plus organizations. So if you're, in that space, please hit me up, as well as in the child welfare space. I've talked a lot about that, but if you know someone or if you are in that space, actually do not be afraid to message me because I'm really chill and no formalities are needed. And so, yeah, these are the spaces I work in. I work a lot in social finance. So if you're trying to understand more about that space and what that looks like, if you're a business student, just I don't want to work at McKinsey, please hit me up. So yeah, that's what I'm up to. And yeah, you can hit me up on LinkedIn as well.
For sure, that all sounds great. And yeah, while folks are here, definitely just take pictures, take screenshots, if that's the easiest method, instead of having to copy and paste or write down all the links and everything. Yeah, definitely stay in touch and keep your foot in the door with these panelists because they do a lot of great work. But yeah, I want to just say thank you again to the panelists. Just pretty much giving an insight on the type of fight and then the journey you guys are on for the fight for equality. And again, thank you again for the audience for being here. It was a great experience being a moderator for the first time, and especially being a moderator during this panel, especially felt really great. So I thank you everybody for going easy and having a lot to say. And yeah, again, hope everybody has a great night.